Welcome, survivors, seekers, and thrivers. I'm your host, Shari Lee Roberts, psychic medium, energy healer, and living proof that you can transform your pain into power. Each episode, we dive into trauma healing, developing your intuitive gifts, and reclaiming your life. Get ready for real stories, deep wisdom, and a little laughter along the way.
Welcome back. I have a very awesome Jonathon Aslay here today. Oh my God, so many things to talk about, but Jonathan, I'd love for you to give us a little bit about yourself. And welcome.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Sherry. I appreciate it. You know, this is one of those questions I don't know where best to begin. So I'll begin kind of with my awakening, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I say awakening, much through my life, I followed a blueprint that my parents instilled upon me was go to college, get a job, meet someone, get married, buy a house, start a family. That was the blueprint of my life.
Yeah.
And at the same time, this was in the mid 90s or mid 80s, when I was a young adult, there was this movie, Wall Street. And in that movie, the theme was greed is good.
Yeah.
And so, my life was really spent in a very myopic, focused, selfish driven mentality, if you will.
Yeah.
And that was even true by the time I got married. I was very myopic, very selfish. And I'll be candid with you, I wasn't that good of a husband. I was more focused on making money and just being, the provider protector in that sense, but more importantly, to rising up the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
And something happened to me in 2005. My wife wasn't happy with who I was, rightfully so. I went through a divorce. 1 month later, I lost my high-end corporate job. And then within a few years, I got wiped out in the market crash of 2008. So my identity was pummeled. I mean, absolutely pummeled, on so many different levels. And what's interesting, I began doing drugs and alcohol to kind of self-medicate. I would barricade myself in my room and just not want to go out. In fact, I reached a point where I went to bed wishing I didn't wake up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the other drugs of choice was actually online dating. And what I mean by drug of choice, I became very addicted to the nature of connecting with people. And keep in mind, this was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was a different world than we are today. I mean, the world has changed dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But online dating became a place of refuge, a place of connection, a place of avoidance, a place of selfishness.
Mm-hmm.
But what was interesting, Sherry, was as I was making connections with women, and in many cases, I wasn't even physically dating them. I was just talking to them on the phone and hearing them share their story about their marriages and their divorces and raising their children. And it became a form of therapy for me.
Yeah.
But here's the fascinating piece. I was making so many female friends all across the country. They'd reach out and say, "Hey, Jonathan, will you look at my dating profile and help me make it better?" And then I would suggest revamping their profile from the male perspective.
Yeah.
And then I get phone calls from women going, "Well, Jonathan, can you look at this guy's profile that I'm going out at?" Because I'm making friends with women. And they're like, well, you look at the guy's profile and tell me what you think about the guys. And I had this intuitive sense about reading energy, reading male behavior, because I was going through my own, trauma and crisis and all that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
had a knack for it. And so about, a few years later, I put up a cheesy website saying I'm a dating coach. And I say cheesy because at first I had no
Yeah.
idea what I was doing. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I was birthed a completely new, I don't want to say identity, but it birthed an opportunity to make a living for myself. But here's the other kicker to this. I immersed myself in personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy
Yeah.
because I recognized I was the common denominator of all my problems. And in that, not only was I coaching from a perspective of being of service, I was also just healing a boatload of childhood wounds and adult traumas that
Yeah.
caused me to show up as that selfish, greed is good type of person. And there's more to the story, but I'll bring you that brings you up to date to about 7 or 8 years ago. So if you have
Oh,
anything you want to ask in that, feel free.
yes. Take us back to your childhood. What trauma was there? Give us an insight to your family and
Yeah.
upbringing.
Yeah. So, I was born in the early 60s. I'm a late baby boomer.
Me
And
too.
my
Yeah.
parents were immigrants from another country, from Istanbul, Turkey. And why that's relevant is, the United States was coming off of World War II, 15 years prior, or 17 years prior, I should say. And the energy of the country felt very, I don't want to say white because there were lots of immigrants, but where I
Yeah.
lived, I felt awkward because I didn't feel like I fit in from a family perspective.
Mm.
That's number one. Number two, I had parents that, the United States was awkward for them too. So a lot
Yeah.
of things like just in my childhood, my father was figuring it out as he was going along. I didn't feel like I had a rooted sense of a father who understood like Indian guides and, and Cub Scouts and all those kind of things. It was new for him too. It wasn't something
Yeah.
like he was indoctrinated in. My parents spoke broken English, so that felt very embarrassing, very shameful.
Mm.
Also, being from another country, I was picked on, Turkey. I was, lots of name,
Mm.
calling, that sort of thing.
Mm.
Um, my father was still a remnant of the old school, where you did something wrong, he slapped you really hard across the face or took
Yeah.
a belt. I don't think he did that from an intentional, malicious place, but certainly I had plenty of beatings growing up.
Yeah.
Um, my mother was probably a borderline narcissist, so the world revolved around her and
Oh,
her emotions, and I had to tiptoe around her emotions growing up, which
yeah.
left a scar on me, just to name a few. The irony, my mother used to call me a pessimist when she was the pessimist. And and I was
Yeah.
like, she was like, you're always a pessimist. And I'm like, it wasn't until I went to therapy that I realized no, she was projecting her stuff onto me.
Yes. Yes.
And so as an adult, I had developed a very anxious attachment style. I have always felt uncomfortable in crisis situations.
Yeah.
I don't feel I have certainly felt incompetent. I had a school teacher at third grade tell me I was stupid in front of the classroom.
Yeah.
So And certainly I was influenced and I was bullied as a kid. So a lot of, little traumas, not big traumas, but little traumas.
No.
Now I kind of got a little bit of revenge. Yeah, I kind of got a little bit of revenge because in eighth grade, I grew 9 inches. So I went to being the tallest kid in the class. And there's something about height that
Yeah.
people don't mess with you the same.
Yeah.
So I'm 6'2", 210 pounds now,
Wow.
so things started to shift just purely by genetics.
Yeah.
Um, but all of those experiences left scars. And
Yeah.
my coping mechanism was to go into that greed is good kind of self-protection
Yeah.
mode. And yet it didn't serve me in my life. It didn't serve me in a variety of different ways. So that's kind of giving you the childhood narrative of
Yeah.
what went on.
Awesome. Well, not, but I totally relate.
Yeah.
So you met your wife
Yeah.
when and what age were you?
So in 1990, when I met my wife, I was following that programming. All of my friends were meeting somebody and we were going to weddings. So it was kind of like, and she fit the narrative.
Yeah.
My rules were really simple. I was attracted to her. She had a college education. She came from good parents, but, and I don't know why I made that the criteria, but that was like, well,
Well, yeah.
college was a real, like, that was something my generation, my parents' generation instilled upon you. Go to college, go to college, go to college,
Yep.
go to college.
Yep.
You need a
Yep.
college education. And so, and the person I met's a wonderful, I mean, she's a wonderful being. We have a very friendly and amicable relationship right now. But I recognize that, there's a couple things. First, I didn't know who I was, I mean,
Right.
in the sense that when you're young, you're still trying to figure out who you are. And when you partner
Yeah.
with someone, and you're
Yeah.
doing it because you're making babies and raising families, I went into it kind of not a sovereign being. Number
Yeah.
two, I don't think I was in love with her. And I don't think she was in love with me. In fact, we did therapy and she kind of said to the therapist, I was never in love with Jonathon. I think we entered into an unconscious transactional relationship because we're following programming. I mean, I don't even
Yeah.
know what I didn't even know what love was. I didn't know what self-love was. And so I think, we're all, you know, we have this fantasy expectation based on movies of what relationships should be like before we ever have the
Yeah.
capacity. And Sherry, I didn't even have the emotional tools or the communication tools to be in a good relationship.
Yeah.
I was so unconscious because this stuff is never taught to us, and yet it's
Right.
expected at such a grand level. It's the expectation of being this wonderful partner to another human being
Yeah. Yep.
without ever being trained at it. And then there's a judgment around going through divorce as if that's something wrong. And it's really a reflection of unconsciousness in most cases, in my opinion.
Totally agree. So, and 22. I am in my wedding gown. My dad walks into the scene. He looks at me and asks, Bug, are you ready to do with this? My dad looks at me and asks that. And I looked up at him, wanting to say, no, oh, no,
Yeah.
Dad, save me. Take me from this hell I put myself into. And he looks at me beaming. He had put a ton of money into the wedding. Didn't
Yeah.
want to disappoint my
Yeah.
narcissistic father.
Yeah.
So I put my arm in his. I'm like, yes, let's do it. Walking up the aisle, my soon to be husband looked more terrified than me. It was clear that we should never have married. Totally get where
Yeah.
you came from and that whole thing. I was in that marriage for 23 years.
Oh, wow.
Two
Okay.
kids, how about you? How long did it take you to say, wow, not good, I'm out?
Well, I think much like you, I was walking down the aisle, or I was standing at the aisle, I should say, or at the
Mhm.
altar, and I knew something wasn't right.
Yeah,
But at the same time, you're caught up in the hoopla, you've been in
yeah,
so many other weddings, all that kind of stuff. And the
yeah,
first few years was fun. We were socializing, having a good time. It wasn't, I mean, it wasn't bad or anything like that. It was
yeah,
just, we weren't as emotionally connected
yeah,
because I wasn't emotionally connected to myself. So I want to
right.
start with that.
Yeah,
We were
yeah.
married 12 and a half years,
Mhm.
and she recognized, I was committed to staying forever because that's kind of what my parents did, but I wasn't happy. She wasn't happy.
Yeah,
She initiated the conversation. We separated. We did, and we went to therapy. And the therapist was like, the two of you are just in two different camps.
yeah.
And during the marriage, we had two children. The
Mhm.
time we got divorced, so we'd been married 12 and a half years. The children were 5 and 8, I think, give or take, 5.5, 8.5 kind of thing. So, and there was, and keep in mind, I'd lost my job 1 month after we filed for separation. There was a lot of just unfortunate confrontation because I was a high end income earner, and 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 I couldn't find a job to save my life. And when
Wow.
I say I lost my job, they shut down my division. I got laid off, and I was allowed to go back into sales, but I was in such emotional disarray that I just didn't have the heart to go back into sales. I didn't have the
Yeah,
energy to go backward into
yeah,
sales and start over again. And for the next 5 years, I was in limbo, professionally, because as I said, I my identity was just pummeled. So, and I had the responsibility of supporting a family, and I was in really emotional chaos, not from a place of abandonment, from a place of just I actually wanted to not live anymore. I went to
yeah.
bed for over a year wishing I didn't wake up. That's how
Yep.
emotionally draining it was. And I thought it
Yeah.
would be better that my children have the life insurance money than me. And
Yep.
so,
Yep.
and again, if it wasn't for my online dating addiction, I wouldn't have found my passion and where I am today as a top dating and relationship coach in the country, because I was in such emotional distress.
Incredible and beautiful that when we move on from that dark place, that we realize our true purpose. I mean, I also wanted to end it all, and God said, no, no.
Yeah.
You're meant to do and be more. Get it together and go. I'm like, oh, crap. Okay, fine. Take us now from where you said you started helping people daily. Take us now from that like time where you were helping friends and doing your own online dating to making it your thing, your
Yeah.
business, writing about it. I mean, yeah. How did that happen?
So, it's interesting. And for those listening, I just want to say, whenever you feel like you're at the darkest in your life, you'd be surprised how Sherry said, God intervened, or however you view it from a spiritual perspective. Um, I had a simple mantra. And my mantra, and I was in a lot of emotional distress, but my mantra was a quote from Walt Disney, and it said, just keep moving forward. And for whatever
Yeah.
reason, that was my simple mantra, just keep moving forward. And at the time, I was, Facebook back in 2007 was still kind of the Wild West. And I was posting about dating and relationships. And a little by little, I'm getting a bit of traction. I'm being invited to be on a summit. I'm being invited to be on radio shows. This was before it was called podcasts.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I'm gaining a little bit of traction, and I also live in an area where I connected with a lot of the more seasoned relationship coaches, and we started a mastermind group. So I was connected with other people. I was talking about what it's like. My specialty was working with women, helping them understand divorced men. That was my specialty. If you
Ah,
were a 40-year-old
nice.
woman dating a 40-year-old man, here's what to expect kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned to you, but I also began a journey of personal development, self-help, spirituality, and therapy. So I was doing my own inner work while I was building my business. And then I began incorporating what I was learning in my inner work into my business. And I was actively dating too. I was a single man in the dating marketplace.
Wow.
So I was also
Wow.
keeping, like working on my craft at the same
Yeah.
time. And
Yeah.
and I met I call her an angel in my life. I end up meeting a woman. She was a therapist. She was actually on television. and we began a relationship together, and she really helped for the next 6 years of my life ground me, helped me build a bit of my reputation in the sense that, I had a stable relationship. And we actually did some talks together. Um, and it helped propel me to a place where I had a stable business. Um, in 2017, we decided our relationship wasn't the type to go the distance. It wasn't the type to lean into partnership. So we had a very conscious uncoupling. Actually, it made the news when we announced it publicly. It made the news that day. It was kind of
Wow.
surprising that it was like our story, our story publicly made this
Yeah.
local news because we did something called conscious uncoupling. At the
Yeah.
same time, my dear friend Catherine Woodward Thomas was writing a book about conscious uncoupling. Gwyneth Paltrow was uncoupling from her partner. So there was a bit of synergy there. And in 2007, well, actually, we had a little bit of a breakup before in 2014, and then we got back together a couple times. So I should say the first breakup was in 2014. Anyway, um, while I'm in the midst of growing my business, doing my personal development work, healing from the breakup, my 19-year-old son passed away um, due to an accident, and
Wow.
and and in the midst of my grief, I had been blogging about what it means to love oneself.
Mhm.
And 2 months after he passed away, I immersed myself in writing a book. It was published 9 months later. The book is called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? A Journey of Personal
Nice.
Development, Self-Help, Spiritual Work, and Therapy. And it's
Nice.
not about dating or relationships, but it is the most important part of a relationship is to love thyself, to be in thy sovereignty. And through the experience of losing my son, I really immersed myself in what does it mean to love? What does it mean to love yourself? What does it mean to love others? What does it mean to approach life from love, not from fear, not from ego, not from past
Yes.
hurts, not from vanity
Yeah.
and fantasy? And it began shifting my trajectory. Um, in that my and at the same time, a few years later, my YouTube channel, I began um, growing. Now I have over 200,000 followers or subscribers, I should say. And it's more about talking about dating and relationships under the vantage point of, if you're not working on yourself, if you're not developing emotional
Yeah.
maturity and relationship skills, it doesn't matter how many people you have in your life, they won't solve you. You have to work on yourself. So my conversation is more geared to encouragement of everybody to do personal development, self-help, spiritual work, therapy, learn the skills to communicate better, learn the skills to regulate your emotions, learn how to resolve conflict, learn how to listen better. I don't teach those things. I just encourage people to do that. And that's what my platform is built on, is that, there's a saying, you can't love another until you love yourself. Well, here's the thing. We never ever fully love ourselves. I don't believe that we ever reach a nirvana of loving ourselves or
Oh,
let, like reaching, but it is
I,
off. It's in the, go ahead.
I disagree
Well,
wholeheartedly. I am on board with we must love ourselves. So, for me, having gone through a lifetime of abuse and trauma, when my healing journey began, I was told to formulate positive affirmations. And the first one was, I love myself. And when I said that, oh my God, I didn't.
Mm.
I, those words did not resonate at all. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe I do not love myself. So the journey continued until I learned to love myself. And yes, until we do that, we can't love anyone
So,
else fully or our life, and our journey continues, of course, but
so I want to clarify something. I believe that, there's the expression, you can't love another until you love yourself. Okay. But I believe that there's this perception that loving yourself is like this top place. And where I was going was, I believe when we work on ourselves, when we're loving on ourselves, when we're in that active state of healing, that doesn't mean that that precludes you from entering into a relationship with another human being, because two people can help each other grow beyond, like there's always room to grow. I don't feel like you reach a
right,
place where it's overflowing,
right.
like it's
No.
over, because there's always more room to grow. And so
Right.
my point is, so long as you're actively working on yourself, you're healing, you're in a state of loving yourself and open to loving others, I just simply meant it shouldn't preclude one from going, I can enter into a relationship with someone, because we are fallible human beings. There's so much more room to grow that we don't ascend until we, reach that, maybe the last 7 seconds of our lives, we reach that place. But there's always more room to grow. That's what I meant in that, you know. However, if you genuinely lack deep self-worth, lack deep self-regard, deep self-respect, deep self-discipline, self-reliance, that sort of thing, if you're hurting, then yes, that's the time to work on loving yourself. And then when you reach a tipping point, not that that's something that we can measure, I just believe that when we're working on ourselves, we can do that in partnership as well.
Well, I have found for myself, my clients, and others, until we love ourselves, we energetically attract people who are going to provide opportunities to grow. Meaning,
Yeah.
I was raised with and only knew narcissistic men
Yeah.
until I learned that and learned to love myself. Did I attract higher vibrating men
Yeah.
have a man.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I'm in a relationship going on 4 months, and I genuinely believe this is my life partner. I see this as going the distance, and 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 yet I still have some pain residue from my past. Not narcissistic or anything like that. It just um, some self-worth pain. And thankfully my partner, and I'm very aware of it. I'm very aware of
Yeah,
my stuff.
yeah,
And rather than hiding it or stuffing it or being stoic, I share, personally with my partner some of the things that bring me, like make me feel, that's uncomfortable.
yeah,
And what I'm most grateful for is I have a partner, and we are a partner to each other in this way, that we support each other on growth. And we have numerous conversations
yeah,
in the area of personal development, self help, spirituality to reinforce our relationship. And so, like you experienced a narcissistic abuse in your life, you've evolved past that. And yet I do, and there's certainly, I think we're always given opportunities to love ourselves. It could be simply we're in traffic and we get frustrated. That's a great opportunity to look inward and say, why am I getting so frustrated? It's just
yes,
traffic, kind of thing.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
when we have my differences with a partner, you know, it's like, do you want to make a mountain out of a molehill, kind of thing? When I look at relationships, sadly, where they dig their heels in their, being right versus being happy, you know, loving ourselves is also letting go of all those little nuances to really step into a place of just absolute acceptance, absolute love. And it's constant work, I believe. And I
yeah,
don't, when I say the word work, I mean it in a very loving way. I don't mean like you have
yes,
to go to a therapist kind of work. It's just
right,
working on our judgments, working our
yeah,
negative patterns, our limiting beliefs, the way our actions affect others. Self-awareness is like fine-tuning a guitar. We're never, you can play a guitar for a while and it can get out of tune. And
yeah,
self-love is always tuning yourself. And ideally, if you find in the romantic sense, if you find a partner that says, hey, I want to tune the guitar with you, or I want you to help me tune my guitar. And and I even look at my relationship like a sailboat. You're always turning the rudder, always to keep it on course. And it's
yeah,
little adjustments. If you have to make big adjustments, that might mean doing it by yourself. But if you're in the
yeah,
right relationship, you're steering the boat together to keep it on course. And that's another form of self love. So these are all the ways I perceive this,
yeah.
from both an individual basis and a romantic basis.
Awesome. So, what are your final thoughts or words of wisdom to those that are single
Yeah.
and want to find love?
You know, it's funny because I thank you for the question. So oftentimes I get, and since I mostly work with women, it's like, where can I find a good guy? And and I understand we no longer live in environments, especially for those of us in midlife, and I say midlife is after baby making years and before retirement. So most of
Yeah,
my audience is between the age of 42 and 69. 20-year-old people are surrounded more by single eligible people, so it's a
yeah,
different way of looking at it. But for our age demographic, we have to recognize that on some level we have to be seen by somebody to either ask them out or be asked out. So it's understanding that today's environment, if you want a relationship, it's going to require effort versus the fantasy that you'll just bump into somebody at the grocery store. By the way, that does happen, but it is so rare. Today's environment, 65% of all couples meet through an online connection, and that's going to be 75% in the next decade. I mean, so it's acceptance that this is the way people meet. My words of wisdom: put together a wonderful profile that stands out, that says, hey, I'm somebody who really wants a relationship. Put together quality photographs, put together a quality essay, recognizing that you're going to get a lot of looky-loos, understand there's going to be a lot of people that are misaligned with you, and being okay with that. Like it's okay that I may be approached by the wrong person. There's nothing wrong with that. Instead of going into judgment or criticism or bitterness or that sort of thing. It's like being okay with it. Ultimately, learning good communication skills. I can tell you, just because someone's desirous of a relationship doesn't mean that they're good at being in a relationship.
Yeah.
I witnessed so many women who want a relationship, but their communication skills are poor. They often stuff their voice. They don't learn to speak up for themselves. That's that self-love piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
And certainly men today are a little bit bitter and jaded too, because they might have gone through a divorce. And so here's my words of wisdom. Look for people who've done the inner work.
Yeah.
Look for, like, if you're a woman listening to this, look for men who have done inner work, because they're more apt to be capable of being in a relationship. Look for men who have done therapy. Look for men who do personal development work, spirituality work, and ask really good questions in the beginning, instead of this fantasy that, we're so hyper focused on, attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection. Ask some really hard questions right from the very beginning when you're dating, just to see if you're aligned in the same page. And then let the physical grow from there, instead of being fearful. And ladies who are listening to this, don't be afraid to do this. Many of you have fear that you're going to miss out on a great guy. And let me just say this: in my book, chapter 1 is speak your truth, do it from a kind place. But chapter 9, if it's sincere and from the heart, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. Speak from your heart, the right person will gravitate towards you.
Love that it resonates. Is someone who's done the work that resonates. I mean, for a man who I would meet, I'm gonna ask things. I'm gonna be me, And if he can't relate, then he is not my guy. Thank you, and congratulations on your gal and relationship.
Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you for listening. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to explore your own healing journey or intuitive gifts, I'd love to work with you. I offer psychic medium readings, energy healing sessions, and intuitive development guidance at shariroberts.org. And if you're not quite ready for a session, but want to be a part of the conversation in a supportive community, join my private Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. This is Shari Lee Roberts. Until next time, remember, you're never alone.